Ezra Levant for Rebel News. I'm standing in front of a fairly nondescript building that's actually the Federal Court of Canada. They're in a regular office tower here in Toronto. The Federal Court is a special court that deals with, obviously, federal matters. That would include challenging certain federal laws. You wouldn't go to federal court, for example, a regular contract dispute or a criminal matter. You would go to federal court if you're challenging, for example, Justin Trudeau's QCJO, Qualified Canadian Journalism Organization, news license. What I mean by that is a few years ago, Trudeau thought he would regulate who is and isn't a journalist. You have to apply to the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency. They examine your journalism and give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down based on their political criteria. Instead of journalists holding politicians to account, politicians are now holding journalists to account. Sorry, that's not how it works in a democracy, but bizarrely, that's how it works in Canada. And I actually haven't heard a single journalist out there criticize that, because they all get the QCJO status. So if every journalist who asks for it gets the QCJO status, what's the point? Why have a journalism license at all? Because not every journalist who applies for it gets it. Rebel News applied for it, and we didn't get it. In fact, it's my theory that this law was created just to get Rebel News. I'm not the only one who believes that. I've heard two other journalists call this the Rebel News Law or the Get Rebel Law. And my point is, if you have this QCJO status, you get certain benefits from the government. For example, the $8 a month that many people pay Rebel News to get our premium shows, if we had QCJO status, you could write that off on your taxes. We don't, so you can't. That's not a huge thing, but I bet we would have thousands more subscribers if it was tax deductible. You get a media credential. You can show up at government press conferences. That's a way to keep us out. But there's other things that actually scare me a little bit. For example, if you are not a QCJO licensed journalism organization, Justin Trudeau's CRTC can order broadcasters like Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram to throttle you. Whereas if you have the QCJO news license, he can order them to boost you. That's all in Bill C-11, which passed about a year ago under the name of discoverability. Justin Trudeau and his hand-picked CRTC officers can order online video broadcasters like Twitter or Facebook or YouTube to boost or throttle channels of his own choosing. There's other cash benefits too. I don't know if you remember, but under C-18, another one of Trudeau's laws, companies like Google have to chip in an enormous fund that's divided up amongst, you guessed it, QCJO licensed companies. So Google every year is putting in $100 million into this huge pie that all the QCJO journalists get to divide up. Rebel News, of course, is not a QCJO journalist. We won't get any of that dough. Now, I want to be very clear here. Rebel News has never and will never accept government money. But this is money that Google says they want to spend to Canadian content creators. It's Google's money. They say they want to do it, but you can only get access to it if you have this news license. I have no idea how much would be set aside for Rebel News. I haven't exactly been counting it, but this is a real example of how the QCJO news status affects our company. It is the Rebel News, Get Rebel News law. For now, because at 9:30 a.m. in this courtroom, two of our sharpest lawyers, Sarah Miller and Robert Hawks, are challenging the QCJO status as unconstitutional. If you know your Constitution, in our Charter of Rights, Section 2 talks about what are called fundamental freedoms. That is, they're freedoms so important, we put them in a special list right at the beginning of the Charter. Things like freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom of association, freedom of assembly. Those are considered the fundamental freedoms. And Section 2B refers to freedom of the press. We're going in there for a full day hearing to challenge in federal court Justin Trudeau's ability to license or refuse to license journalists. I'm hopeful that we'll make a difference. I think we've got the good case. I think we've got the good facts. I think we've got the good lawyers. And I think we have a fair judge. I've got to hope that. I'm going to be live tweeting this throughout the day. And at the lunch break and afterwards, I'm going to give a bit of an update. The judge will not have her ruling today. Given how complex it is and how long the hearing is, the judge will probably take weeks, maybe even months, to write a carefully reasoned ruling. Could be 50 pages long for all I know. But we are going to be in there today. We got the best lawyers, and that's only possible because of you. I haven't been into court yet, but it would surprise me if there were fewer than 5 government lawyers on the other side, all paid for by your tax dollars. Whereas our lawyers, Sarah Miller, who's done amazing work, as you know, in Alberta, for example, she's been Arthur Pawlowski's lawyer, and Robert Hawkes, who's a very senior King's Counsel, as they're called. We've got a great team, but it's only because of you. And if you want to help us chip in to crowdfund our lawyers, please go to wearesuingtrudeau.com. Wearesuingtrudeau.com, because we are. Because if we don't, who will? I'm going to go inside now, but let me emphasize that last point. The Canadian Association of Journalists is not against this news license because they all have it, because they all get the dough. The Canadian Journalists for Free Expression are not against it. Amnesty International, PEN Canada, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, none of these groups are opposed to the government regulating who is or isn't a journalist. They either don't care, couldn't be bothered, have other fish to fry, or in the case of journalists, they're on the inside. It's an inside job. Why would they rock the boat when they're the ones getting these benefits? Only Rebel News is fighting that fight. It's going to be lonely in there in the courtroom, but I'll be live tweeting it on my Twitter account, which is simply my name, Ezra Levant, and we'll be posting updates at least twice today at wearesuingtrudeau.com. Thanks for your support.